Hi there, Pixel Fight Clubbers. This is Marie, and I'm reviewing the week of 10/16/17, and I see I can't even type. Well, we'll start out with never fails. We'll start out with Sherry's Pumpkin Man. This is well composed. I don't see any compositing artifacts anywhere. It's a little awkward here at the neck. Overall, compositionally, photographically speaking, it's a good composition. The main subject is on a third intersection of the lower third and the left third. It's clear on most of the image where the light is coming from. The light is coming from this large blue area in the forest. Now, you all know that I keep my monitor dark so it matches the prints that I make. So I generally start out by adding a bit of light so I can see exactly what's going on. I also gave a little more pop of light to this raven so we could see him. Now overall, the light is blue, but we've got an awful lot of yellow here in the pumpkin, and she's covered it up quite nicely with some green moss, but it's still a little on the blue side. And the light is coming from the top rather than from the same direction as everything else does. So what I did was I did a hue and saturation layer, and I moved the lighting over to the blue side, someplace 7, 9 in there. And just adding that extra blue color made the pumpkin sit in the scene. I thought it sat in the scene a lot better. I also added an effect to the pumpkin, and it oh dear, I should have had this off. The light is coming from the top, so I added a gradient overlay. And let me show you what that is. Basically, what I've done is I've used, because the light is so blue, I'm using a black to a very light blue. Ordinarily, I would use black to white, but the light is so strongly blue, I did that. Now here we'll put it in normal so you can see what it looks like. And we can adjust the angle of this light with the angle slider. And I messed that up. I can't remember what number it was on, but somewhere in there. It doesn't really matter. And the scale, basically, we can scale it from real sharp edges to a very soft edge. And all we need to do is change the blend mode. And the two blend modes that we use are either overlay or soft light. And in this case, I thought soft light worked very well. We can adjust the opacity, but I thought this went on fairly well all by itself. I did think the green moss was a little darker than it should be. So I went over to the channels. Whoops. I turned off the whole man and I went over to the channels and I control or command clicked on that RBG channel and it selects the light areas. So we go back over to the layers and I added a layer mask. And if we look at the layer mask, you can see that in the layer mask, the light areas are black and gray, while the dark areas are white. So you can see with this mask what we're going to change when we put the mask on. And I show this mask by clicking the holding the alter the option button when I click on or off. So if we lighten up that just a little bit, maybe that's a little bit too much, but that's the nice thing about this. We can always change the levels a little bit. But Sherry, you can take what you will out of it. I think this is very well done. The things that I showed you were minor. I'm being very picky with you because you're all pretty good. The only criticism, negative comments that I would have was that the assignment for this week was clearly a jack-o'-lantern, and jack-o'-lanterns are pumpkins with holes in them to let the light out. And it would be nice if you let this poor man breathe with a couple of holes. Okay, now let's go to Helen. Helen, you've done a nice job. The composition, the pumpkins are right in your face. There's no trouble figuring out what the subject is. I would like to see the rest of this little pumpkin, but if he wasn't on the picture, it's hard to put him back. The candles that you've added sit really well inside the pumpkins. They look as if that's the way the picture was when you took it, particularly since both candles have, maybe one of the candles should have been reversed so the wicks wouldn't be in the same direction. But that's again, these are minor thoughts. It is again dark. I like my stuff lighter so I can see them, so I added a camera raw filter and I was able to get a little bit more light onto it. But it's just a very narrow band of light, and it's obvious that the light is coming from our right and scraping across the top of the pumpkins. And somehow this pumpkin is lit a little more. I'm guessing this was taken with a flash someplace because there's such a harsh shadow here. We usually only see that with flashlighting, but maybe it was a flashlight. It's really hard to tell. You've done an excellent job here on the bevel and emboss around the cutouts. I like the little texture. It adds just a little certain something. And the backgrounds that you've got at the back of the pumpkins, especially the one on the left, the way the eyes are lit, are very nice. I think perhaps you've put a little gradient in the middle there. Maybe the gradient should come down a little bit closer to the candle and maybe a little bit wider. But again, that's something I can't tell until I actually look at it. I did try a levels adjustment, again, so I could see more because they look like beautiful flowers on the back. I understand why you'd want to keep this front really dark. Excuse me. But the background, I don't know. Maybe I'd like to see more of it. Maybe not, because it's about the same sharpness as the pumpkins are, so maybe that's why it was fixed. There's one thing, Helen, that I think you should change, and I'm going to zoom in here on that, and that's the shadow on the teeth and the eyes in the cutouts. In reality, you cannot put a shadow on a flame any more than you can put a shadow on a mirror. Mirrors and flames just don't have shadows. And so the shadow from the light, and it is indeed coming from the direction the light is, would be on the back of the pumpkin, but there's a light source between the back of the pumpkin and the tooth. So you don't need the shadows at all, I don't think, on the insides of the cutouts. I think you could get by without it. Okay, next we go to Archimedes here. Jim is always very humorous. It always lights up my day to see your images, or generally. There's a few that not so much. But anyways, you've got, photographically speaking, a triangular composition. And our eyes go between the bright pumpkin, the bright canvas, and the bright paint. So we've got a triangle going on, and triangles are strong. That's why they use them to build bridges with. I think it's humorous that you've put pi to the nth digit here on the chalkboard, and I like the way you've blurred the chalkboard and the chalk to make it look like it's a distance away from Archimedes here. You should also blur the window frame the same amount as you blurred the chalk frame. I considered wondering what it would look like as a vertical composition, but I didn't like it very well. It needs something to relieve all the darkness, and just adding those chalk letters and the window really helped. You might want to lower the opacity of the chalk lettering just to see if it would look like it were farther away from his hat and it wouldn't pull your eye away from Archimedes. Same thing with Sherry. This was a jack-o'-lantern and we can't see his face. I see Helen suggested a mirror might solve your problem, but nonetheless, very well done. Stanley, another humorist. I chuckled at this one. I thought it was so neat. And at first glance, wow, you put those eyeballs in really well, Russell. I'm just impressed. Excuse me. And then I zoomed in a little bit and I see, well, it's not really placed in the pumpkin. You've just used looks like a stroke to make it look like they're set in the pumpkin, but it works. We also see, I like the way you've used the stems to make the noses. They probably shouldn't touch the eyes here. And we've got a nice mouth going on. You should try and play with different bevel and emboss settings and different curve settings on that to see what would come out. Nice guy. But there is a bit of a contrast. Well composed. It's right up in our faces. We know what's going on. But there is a contrast. It's like there's two photographs here, a bright, saturated photo and a dull, unsaturated photo. Well, I played around a little bit to see if I could brighten those pumpkins up a little bit, and I was able to do so. And once I brightened them up, I could see you had two sets of pumpkins. We have the set in the back that were probably taken as all one photo, and they have a rim light, which means the light is coming from behind them. If we look at our subject pumpkins, the light is coming from their left and top left. So all of these pumpkins should have the same lighting. And I played around with it a little bit, and I chose a couple of pumpkins and put them up on their own layer. And the first one we're going to look at is this pumpkin. And again, I went ahead for the gradient overlay here. And I'll show it back at normal. And I'm using the light slightly from the top and from the side as if it were there. And this time, the soft light didn't do enough, so I ended up putting an overlay on it to get it to look more like the regular pumpkin, the pumpkin min. And then I looked at this one down here, and whoops, and I put the gradient overlay along the top, and I'll show you that. Yeah, I might. Along the top, like the rim lighting was. And again, I left that at overlay because it showed up a little bit better than not. Now, the next thing I did was I added a layer. Well, first I selected this layer by Command or Control clicking on it. I added a layer and grabbed a brush, a white soft edge brush, and I took that brush and I just rimmed the edge of it just a little bit. And then I went ahead and did a blur filter on it, a Gaussian blur. Not quite so much. Looks like maybe 8 or 9, someplace in there. And then after I got rid of the selection, I changed it to soft light. And that soft light, or maybe overlay, yeah, the overlay more mimics it. But if I use overlay, it's too bright and I have to lower the opacity. If I do it soft light, it's not quite enough, and I might try another layer and then lower the opacity on the other layer. So you're getting your rim light from behind. Really nice job. I like the way you and Jim think. Well, we finally get to my entry, and I want to tell you I have struggled over this a lot of different ways. For what I'm showing you now, I took Helen's suggestion. She thought the road in the background was a little distracting because it was light and it had tar patches all over it. Well, I got rid of all the tar patches, but I just couldn't get it dark enough that it wasn't distracting. So what I ended up doing was adding grass all the way up to the edge, and then you can't even see the road, which, by the way, is as narrow as my driveway. My driveway's off to the left, Helen. I also redid the shadows on the pumpkins. I wasn't happy with that. And I have not yet put the vignette around it, but I could really quickly do that. I'm just going to make a quick copy of it, stamped copy, Shift, Alt Option, Command Control E, and then I'll just quickly make that a smart filter. Not so quickly make it a smart filter. Go up to Camera Raw and choose post-crop vignetting. I like color priority over any of the others. I generally feather a little bit more. Around this, I play around with midpoint. Maybe that isn't too bad. That actually makes the pumpkins look like they're glowing. So I say okay. And of course, I got to name it so I know what it is. So I think maybe that's a little bit better than what we had earlier. Not for sure, but anyways, I've taken your suggestions and changed them. It does look better with the vignette than without. I have darkened the building and background. I've changed the color of it just a little bit to match the kind of olive green of my yard that I've extended. So anyways, here's my revised copy. Thank you all for your comments. It is better.